forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And a belated Happy New Year to all of you. Bigger Ten is back for its very first episode in 2024. I am Steve Dace with my co-host, but never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Between travel, between work, between you being sicker than a dog, we were supposed to be back earlier than this, but nevertheless, 2024 is finally underway here. Are you thinking about the fact that in the next few months, you're going to have to come up with some form of a revamped logo and intro for this show? How are you, Aaron?
Yeah, I have actually, but we've gotten some help. And so that's the actual branding, which is the hardest part. That's already pretty much taken care of, and we'll be rolling that out probably after we come back from hiatus in late May, early June, something like that. So we've still got a little bit of time left, and I don't know about you, but this is the time of year where it really hits home that college football is over.
Yep.
Because when the regular season comes to an end, you've got all the holidays and everything, and then the bowls start right after that. And then, even once the bowls are over, you've got still one more week of NFL and then the playoffs. But now in the middle of January, it's really setting in. We're going to be without college football for quite some time.
We are, but I mean, I'm still watching the national championship stuff and finding, a bunch of that, watching it over and over again on YouTube. I'm still in the afterglow. I'm still in all of that. My Detroit Lions are, have a chance to host a second playoff game for the first time in the history of the franchise. So I am feeling it, but I still have some of the championship afterglow as a Michigan fan. In a couple of weeks, I might really have hit that wall, if you know what I'm talking about. So, but I hear you. I'm feeling you. It's the most wonderful time of the year, and it's really now come and gone.
It's really kind of fun secondhand seeing you going through the playoff deal with Detroit right now. It's actually quite endearing. I look over at you and I'm like, oh man, I remember those days.
So hope-filled.
Yeah,
yes.
So hope-filled. And now the other night when the Chiefs were playing the Dolphins, I'm like, when is this game going? Man, I got to go to bed. I'm tired.
Well, you get to the point too, like right now it's new.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just all, wow, if we win, that's incredible. You do this a couple times in a row, like the Chiefs do, and then you're like sweating these out and dreading them. They're not fun anymore until they're over, right? That's how I feel as a Michigan fan is the agony of losing these games concerns me more than the joy of winning them, because you just get so used to being good for a certain period of time. So I get that.
Yeah, I think we do fandom during games a little bit differently. To me, if I'm a Chiefs fan, and I am a Chiefs fan, we've already pretty much proved what we can do. It's like if we don't win it all one year, who cares?
That's true. It's funny because I feel that way now. I mean, we'll get into this here in a little bit, but, Michigan's obviously had a lot of departures, may lose the head coach. I don't care. We won the Natty, man. I mean, we've gone 9-3 and 10-2 so many times in my life, and those seasons netted like nothing. We won the freaking Natty, bro. Okay, that's all I care about, like for the next couple of years at least. So with that, Aaron, let's begin the rundown of our Big Five on Bigger Ten. And let's start there. The four-team college football playoff has come full circle. It began in 2014, the 10-year era did, with Ohio State representing the Big Ten, winning the Big Ten's first national championship since 2002. Only the third national championship the league has won since Ohio State's last national championship team under Woody Hayes in 1968. And the four-team playoff era, Aaron, concludes with the Big Ten winning it. This time, the Michigan Wolverines winning their first undisputed national championship since 1948. Remember, they shared it with Nebraska in 1997. I went over all the superlatives of this team on Michigan podcast. So many historical benchmarks. I yield the floor now to my colleague from the great state of Iowa to provide a secondhand, a third-person perspective, lest I just repeat myself in my giddiness, like just say everything again here that I said on the Michigan podcast last week. What say you?
Yeah, there was never really a point in the game, that national title game, where it felt like Michigan was out of control. You may have a point that they should have probably put it out of reach a little bit sooner than they did, but having this on in the background, not watching as a really hyper-vested fan, it never really seemed. I mean, this game was less competitive than the semifinal game between Alabama and Michigan. So hats off to the Michigan Wolverines. This has been quite a ride. I know for fans like you, having seen this up close. I'm trying to grab the tweet that I posted the night of the college football championship on Bigger Ten, and here it is right here as I pull it up. Because, yeah, it is true. You guys are a very spoiled fan base, even as it is. But you also expect a lot from your teams, which you should with all of the resources that you have and all of the built-in advantages that you have going in. And I was telling another buddy of mine who's a Michigan fan, even with all of those advantages, even with all of those things that really go swing Michigan's way, that don't swing most fan bases' way, you have to think of all of the things that have to go right, even with all of those advantages.
Right.
All of the things that have to go right all the way in a row. And that goes for any team that wins the college football playoff, that wins a national championship. In my mind, the hardest tournament to win in popular American sport is the NCAA basketball tournament because of all of the teams involved and the variance that you can have and the difference that one person can make on a basketball team versus a football team. Second to that, I think, is probably the Super Bowl because of how much parity there is. And third to that, and it's really, 2A and 2B, it is the college football playoff. And just to give you an indication of the swing and the roller coaster that you guys have been on, I posted this that night.
The Surrender Cobra from
from
Michigan
State.
With the Snap.
Yeah, Michigan State, to the young lady who was just in tears at the championship game when it was obvious that Michigan was going to win. So I know this is a good feeling for Michigan fans. I know there's a lot of vindication, obviously, for Michigan fans, and all of the chatter for the entire season about the sign sealing scandal. Those are all put to bed now. You couldn't, whatever you guys were doing, that kind of was put to an end halfway, 3/4 through the season, and you didn't have those supposed signs that you were using to beat everybody. Whatever. I'm tired of that story anyway. A lot of vindication, a lot of this is who we are. So hats off to y'all.
Just in terms of when you listened to the young men on this team, just extremely likable in many cases, and they're going to be missed. I think it's the greatest team in Michigan football history, brother, and that is saying something. But to go 15-0 in this era, as many Big Ten championships as Bo won, you could share titles back then. There are no shared titles. You only have one champion every year now. And it's, you got to win the Big Ten championship game. Then you have to go to a 4-team playoff. The 1997 team just went to the Rose Bowl, and that was it. And Washington State was very good that year, but they were like the 8th ranked team in the country. In this era, they would have played a much better team in the Rose Bowl and then would have had to still play Nebraska probably after that to win the national championship. I think it's the greatest team in Michigan football history, and that's obviously saying something.
Yep, and it might be one of the most complete national champion squads that we've seen in recent memory anyway. And correlated to that, it's probably one of the least flashy national champions we've seen in a while just because they didn't need to be. There's always, no matter how good your team is, there always seems to be a weakness, and so something has to compensate for that with the great teams. And you think back on some of the national champions and national runners-up. I mean, Washington is an example of that with the Heisman quarterback, Heisman Trophy-winning quarterback, and that passing attack, very flashy. Michigan didn't really have that or need it for much of the season. They were just able to bludgeon people and rely on their defense. And for that reason, I don't mean this as I'm not trying to, perform a slight here at all. It's not a very flashy team, because they didn't need to be. They were just solid across the board. And so that's anomalous in and of itself.
Well, let's turn the page forward to 2024, shall we? This seems like a very familiar script. Let me have a mobile game manager quarterback, pair him with maybe the best, most dynamic running back duo in the country, and then have virtually every key member of a celebrated recruiting class feel as if, there's some unfinished business, shall we call it. And a bunch of them decide to take advantage of NIL deals, which do pay well, but don't pay what the NFL pays. So they decide to do that and put off the pros for one more year so that they've got a chance to do something special as a team that they have yet to accomplish. That seemed like a familiar script. It's that kind of happened around here recently. Yeah. That's basically what Michigan did, right? Okay. Well, lo and behold, look what's happening at the Ohio State University, Aaron. Basically, the entire team's coming back except for Marvin Harrison Jr., which you can't blame him. I mean, it's possible he could be the number one pick in the draft. He certainly, I think, will be the first non-quarterback taken in the draft. After that, JTT coming back. Travion Henderson coming back. Emeka Ibuka coming back. A lot of these guys coming back, and they've added Quinshon Judkins, the outstanding all-SEC running back from Ole Miss, to pair him with Travion Henderson. Is Ryan Day essentially saying, as Michigan is seeing an exodus of players? A lot of these were guys that in a traditional setting would have already exhausted eligibility, but because of COVID had one more. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, there's a lot of big losses. Michigan defensively is bringing a ton back. This will still be one of the best defenses in the country, but the Wolverines might have 10 new starters on offense next year. Meanwhile, Ohio State, they're now going to be the team. When we look at Bill Connolly's returning production numbers all offseason, Ohio State's going to be up very high. And they traded quarterbacks. Now, I don't know that there's that much of a difference between Will Howard and Kyle McCord, but Will Howard is more mobile than Kyle McCord. This looks like a very familiar script. Ryan Day, is he essentially saying, hey, man, if you can't beat them, join them. I'll just do what Michigan's done the last few years to me. I'm going to do that to them now.
Yeah, and as disappointing as that season was for Ohio State, and we talk about this a lot with the Blue Bloods. I mean, how disappointed can you be when you won 11 games? But the expectations are just at a different level in places like Ohio State, obviously, and for good reason. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's obvious that kind of the flashy power passing attack of Urban Meyer is not working right now against your chief rival. Now, it's also true. I would caution folks. You have to remember too, it's not just a one-game season anymore. Now, I don't think any of the juice is going to come off of the game, but it's not a one-game season anymore.
Because of the 12-team playoff.
Because of the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
And so it's very likely that both of these teams could be in the playoffs more years than not together. So I would caution people wanting to make wholesale changes with Ohio State, which I don't think they're necessarily doing. I think they're just revamping what they've got. But picking up Quinshon Judkins, I don't think you can understate that guy. That guy's real. I mean, he is a real good player. And so if this is their tack, though, if this is what they say, hey, this is what we're suited for right now, this is more kind of what we need to do, and going to kind of the ground and pound game, then I think they should be able to do that. But I also think you need to give hats off to Ryan Day and that coaching staff, especially at a place like Ohio State, to retain as many players as they did. That's no easy task.
So last offseason at this time, it was going to be Georgia and Michigan 1-2 in every preseason poll. My opinion, it ought to be Georgia and Ohio State 1-2 or 2-1, depending on how you want to look at it, in every preseason poll for this offseason. So we will see. It's not a formula that Ryan Day has pursued since he's been the coach at Ohio State. He's kind of a Sean McVay style, draw it up in the dirt, scheme guys open kind of guy, so it'll be a different approach, but it's one that he has seen work for Michigan. So we'll see now if it works for the Buckeyes. For the first time ever, and this goes to what we were just talking about with the Big Ten now and its looming expansion, we're going to address the University of Washington.
Yeah, this is never not going to be weird to me.
It is weird. We're going to address the University of Washington here because Michigan basically ended Nick Saban. He couldn't take any more. I'm just kidding. But it's funny to say. It's weird for me now to I realized when we got home from the Rose Bowl and then after he retired last week, Aaron, I looked at my wife and I said, holy crap, we saw Nick Saban's last game. That is crazy, But Nick Saban retired out of the blue last week, just said, listen, man, these 14-hour days were a lot easier at 62 than 72. Ain't that the truth? All right. Didn't take long. Alabama replaced him with the offensive wunderkind from the University of Washington. Kalen DeBoer now heads south to take over the Alabama Crimson Tide. And, you know, the old saying in coaching circles, you don't want to be the guy that follows the guy. You want to be the guy that follow the guy that follow the guy. Mm-hmm. But it's a job you can't say no to either if you're Kalen DeBoer. He's already been replaced. Washington went to one of their former Pac-12 contemporaries, the University of Arizona, and they're bringing in former Michigan assistant Jedd Fisch, who did a fantastic job leading Arizona to 10 wins this year, a number 11 final ranking in the AP poll. So we will see him back in the Big. He was going to go to the Big 12 with Arizona. We will see him back in the Big 10 now, coaching the University of Washington next season. By the way, October 5th, Michigan is at Washington in a national championship game rematch. So your thoughts on Caleb DeBoer and what he'll do at Alabama, and then whom the University of Washington replaced him with when we see the Huskies next fall?
Yeah, so for Kalen DeBoer, I mean, this is kind of a gut punch for Washington, but I think they did pretty well in their replacement, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Yeah, this is not going to be necessarily maybe a fun job for Kalen DeBoer, but it's like we talk about with the vice president. It's the job nobody wants, but you can't turn it down.
Right.
I'm sure he wanted a job like that as well. But if Alabama comes calling and they ask you, hey, you want to replace the greatest of all time, you can't turn that down. You just can't. And so we'll see what he has in store. I mean, he is a great coach, and he's proven it everywhere he's gone. He's been a winner. And so he'll have a difficult task ahead in Alabama with the SEC, and an expanded SEC at that. It's a different world than the Pac-12. It's a different world than Division III football. But I think he's proven he has experience, that his winning mindset, whatever that is, his ability to win, that is translated through multiple levels of football. As far as Jedd Fisch goes, he is one of those guys that falls into the category, in my mind, from what I've seen of him, impossible not to like. He's very, very personable individual. I will say one of the last appearances he made on SiriusXM College Football before this move, he assured, I believe it was on the morning show with Rick Neuheisel, he assured them that he's the type of guy that he likes to see things through to the end, and he had no plans on leaving Arizona, which all coaches say things like that when they're moving up the ranks. But he is also a very good, I mean, kind of out of nowhere. I think they were like maybe a 3-win team last season, and then they were very, very good this year. Took Washington, actually, had them on the ropes towards the end of that game, towards the end of the season. But he's a very, very good coach, and he should do just fine at Washington. I know there's a little bit of talk about maybe doing a broader coaching search. I don't know, man. Jedd Fisch, I think that's about as good as you could probably do as far as a head coach goes in this environment right now.
He's basically Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah.
He's more personable than Kalen DeBoer, as you said, but his approach to football, he's another guy scheming up in the dirt kind of guy. I mean, he's basically another Kalen DeBoer, kind of is what they just hired. So should be an easy transition. Now we'll just see if he can do the job. Let's look at these numbers. If you want to know why it's not realignment, it's consolidation. These are the 15 most watched games of the 2023 college football season. Do you notice a trend?
A lot of Big Ten.
8 of the 15 games had at least one current Big Ten team. All of these games had at least one future Big Ten or SEC team, except one, Colorado State. 14 of the 15 games had at least one team from the next year, or I guess this year's, configuration of the Big Ten or the SEC. That's why you're seeing consolidation. This just quantifies it right here. This is why you're seeing Florida State, Clemson, and others trying to get out of their ACC deal. These numbers right here absolutely speak for themselves, Aaron.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the viewership grows as the season goes on. LSU, Florida State, that was an opening weekend game, and they hung almost 10 million viewers. Colorado State, that was an early season game, almost 10 million viewers themselves. But yeah, this is why.
That's the only one. It took a star the likes of Deion Sanders to crack this list. Deion Sanders is the only person that broke the Big Ten SEC cartel hold on college football TV viewers last year.
Yeah, and that's why they're signing hundreds of millions and billions dollar checks to all of these, just a couple of these conferences. And I don't really see this going anywhere. It's crazy. I remember maybe 6-7 years ago, there was a couple of years of dips in college football viewership. Not huge dips, but I started to wonder, hey, I wonder if just whatever is the cause, cultural or otherwise, hey, is this kind of the end of football? People getting mad, getting upset about CTE and player safety and all that type of thing. Viewership has exploded and continued to grow over these past few years. College football is as popular as it's ever been.
Yep.
And it's just been the network's goal. This is all Realignment has been. It's their goal to put as many compelling matchups, as many weeks, and as many time slots as they possibly can. That's the only reason Realignment is happening. There's nothing else other than that. Because they got to make money, and they're going to make money.
More than they ever have before, no doubt. All right. As we close out the Big Five on Bigger Ten, let's go ahead and talk some hoops. Nebrasketball. Now, it's not often, unless a coach is getting fired, that Nebrasketball makes the rundown here on Bigger Ten. But since we last met, the Huskers beat Purdue when the Boilermakers were number one. Aaron, it's the first time Nebraska basketball has beaten a number one ranked team in over 40 years. 1982, not just a Randy Travis song. 1982 was the last time it happened. And if, don't look now, but Fred Hoiberg has Nebraska about 53 in the net right now. Mm-hmm. So that you're at the very least a bubble team at that point. They could very well be looking at a bid to March Madness. So break it up for the Huskers, man. That was a huge win, and they're having a good year.
They are, kind of quietly. It kind of snuck up on me until I finally sat down and watched an Iowa basketball game, and that was the Iowa-Nebraska game on Friday night. And, it kind of snuck up on me that they are having a decent season, a solid season. So you wonder if this could be something like Northwestern experienced last year, where they could make a run and get to the tournament, which is a huge accomplishment for Nebraska basketball. So tip of the hat to them. And with Purdue, they are a weird team, man. They're just a weird team. They've lost to Northwestern, which is not a bad team. They lost to Northwestern and Nebraska. And I don't know what to make of that. I know you're high on them as far as national title aspirations this year, and I don't fault you for that. I mean, they've got the best player in the country, at least arguably. But they do drop some head scratchers. Not to take away anything from Nebraska, but they do drop some of those. Life on
the road, no matter what state the league is in. Life on the road, brother, in the Big Ten is tough every single winter. But I hear you. All right, when we come back, we'll play Would You Rather here next. Stay tuned. All right, Aaron, let's go with some Would You Rather. This one is for you. Would you rather try to win a Super Bowl with the Chargers, whom Jim Harbaugh just interviewed with this week, but they are in salary cap hell, one of the 3 or 4 worst salary caps heading into next year. They're going to have to dump a lot of salary. Or stay at Michigan, where you can probably coach for life if you want. What would you rather do if you were Jim Harbaugh?
Well, I would rather actually go back to the NFL. I know the Chargers are mentioned specifically here, but I would rather go back to the NFL. There are not many people. In fact, there are very, very, very few coaches who can say that they have a chance to coach for a national title and a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And he's already coached for a Super Bowl. He didn't win it, but he's already coached a Super Bowl. So I think he could make it back. There are only 2 coaches, I think, who have won both? 2 or 3 coaches who have won.
Pete Carroll, Barry Switzer, Jimmy Johnson. Those are the only 3 that have won a national title and a Super Bowl.
So I would say, hey, it's now or never, basically.
Yeah.
If you want to do this, it's now or never, because you're not getting any younger. I know, isn't he from Southern California too?
Yep.
So
as
I know
his wife.
I know there are a lot of considerations, family and otherwise, to making another move. But if you have anything within you that says, hey, I want to be one of those 3, maybe going on 4 coaches, it's now or never.
I'm telling you right now, if I am Jerry Jones with the Cowboys, Mr. Blank, the owner of the Falcons, I am absolutely calling Jim Harbaugh before I make a hire.
Yeah.
Yep.
This one is for you. Would you rather build your basketball team through development or make a few splashes through the transfer portal?
I think in basketball, I'd rather do it through the transfer portal. I don't think, in football, you got to do these things. You have to have these things called offensive linemen, and really the way to have a successful program year in and year out is when you get to the point that you've got 10 starting caliber offensive linemen every year. So the best 5 play, but that also requires then that guys are getting 2 or 3 years of development so that you can build that kind of a depth and be, consistently good. That's not required in basketball. And you're only playing 5 guys at a time. And if a couple of them are dynamic and the other 3 guys know their roles, you can be really good. So in that case, in football, the numbers just aren't there to consistently build a winning program utilizing the transfer portal as your primary means of acquiring talent. In basketball, it is. So I can reload a lot faster, and I've got more margin for error. I can maybe lose 10, 12 games and still make an NCAA tournament, get hot at the right time, make a Final Four. I'd much rather utilize the transfer portal. All right, for you, would you rather elevate offensive coordinator Sharon Moore or defensive coordinator Jesse Minter to be head coach if you're Michigan and you lose Jim Harbaugh to the NFL?
I'm actually going to go counterintuitively here. I would rather elevate Jesse Minter to head coach if Jim Harbaugh departs to the NFL. And I believe it was Urban Meyer on the Fox broadcast. It was either the Maryland game or the Penn State game. One of those games where Jim Harbaugh was out talking about the difficulty of calling plays day in and day out or week in and week out in football and how much of a load that is. And then to put on the head coaching duties on top of that. I assume maybe he would. I assume he would stay calling plays if Sharon Moore was there as head coach. So just to eliminate that kind of burden,
unless somebody like Arizona calls Sharon Moore and says, "Come coach us," then
yeah. So I would probably elevate Jesse Minter to defensive or to head coach from defensive coordinator. Your identity is already with defense anyway, so you might as well lead with that with your head coach.
Okay.
Would you rather have had Washington wait and conduct a broader coaching search or just do what they did?
I think given the lateness of the time, you've got schools starting up this week and you have certain deadlines where guys have got to be enrolled or they're not eligible or you can't bring guys in as transfers. It's just such a truncated schedule now with all of this going on. The transfer portal, re-recruiting your own roster, and on top of that, you have another signing day coming up in February. I think it's a good hire. I mean, if they had taken another couple of weeks and come back with Jed Fish, what's the difference? Maybe somebody is better out there, but you're running into that's a calculus, that's a variable. The constant is that the clock is ticking. The variable is if you wait a little bit longer, is there somebody better? Well, this guy knows the region. He's successful in the region. He has an NFL pedigree. He's an offensive guru, so it's not a massive culture shock from the program that Kalen DeBoer was already structuring. So, no, I thought it was a good hire, actually, given the circumstances that they were under.
Agreed.
All right, when we come back, we will close things out with Twitter poll results and our feedback of the week. This week's Twitter poll results: which new conference team will be most prepared to compete for the Big Ten championship in football in 2024? Man, this was really overwhelming. 72% said Oregon. They're losing a lot too, but they are bringing back Dan Lanning, their coach. Alabama wasn't able to pry him away. 24% said Washington. Obviously, this poll is before they lost Kalen DeBoer. 3% said USC. 2% said UCLA. Now, obviously, if we did this poll now, Washington would go down, Aaron. But would that just grow Oregon's lead all the more,
Yes.
or would that go to USC or UCLA?
Yeah, I'm not high on either of those two Southern California schools, and I don't think a lot of people are either. Caleb Williams just announced officially this week he's departing for the NFL. He waited until the deadline to actually do so. So they've got big shoes to fill there. They also have deep coffers at USC and UCLA. So maybe they'll be able to get a transfer in at quarterback, but Lincoln Riley, I think, has some real issues there. So I'd say this poll is not only accurate, but proportionally where each of these teams probably should be.
That brings us to our feedback of the week. Big Phil says this is a tough call with portal and roster fluidity. Yep. For example, Aaron, I am not doing my team total talent ratings the way I have the last few years. There's just too much going on in the portal. I can't keep up. So what I'm going to do after rosters are finalized here heading into spring ball, like in February, I'm going to have to reconstruct every team's roster all over again. There's just been that much level of transition. I can't keep up. And if I trying to keep up in real time makes it, I'm not sure that the numbers are accurate. So I'm going to have to wait and do it, after all the roster movement is done. That's how much roster movement. Hell, Talia Tagovailoa tried to get a 6th year just now from the NCAA so he could probably go quarterback at Michigan, actually. That was the word. It got denied today, so he's off to the NFL draft. There's just way too much player movement, man. It's impossible to keep up with it.
Yeah, it would be a full-time job to do so. I wish there was, maybe there's an opportunity for a business for somebody or a little cottage industry is just keeping an updated, scraped repository of roster information online somewhere. But man, that would take a lot of work unless you could automate it somehow. But there was an opportunity a few years ago. I think you had maybe to do some charting for Pro Football Focus, and I told you, man, don't do this. It's tedious work. You would hate your favorite pastime, and that's kind of what this would become if you were trying to do this from scratch again.
No doubt. That's a good analogy. All right, that'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Good to be back here and back in the swing of things here in the new year. Let us know what you think about what you saw today. Light us up in the comment section. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, follow if you're listening on iTunes or you're watching here on YouTube. Help us to find more Big Ten fans just like you. And thanks to all of you that do those things for us. We appreciate each and every one of them. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X in between episodes. @Bigger10 is where you can find us there, @Bigger10. Until the next time, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you here in a couple of weeks on Bigger 10.